Coming up on the Louis Diaz podcast.
You don't realize that the culmination of those little things is what makes the journey. I think everyone's waiting for that like firework finale at the end, and then they kind of realize that the fireworks have been going off this whole time and just haven't been paying attention, you know?
Hello, and welcome to the Louis Diaz podcast. Every day, I come across some of the most incredibly fascinating and authentic people from all walks of life. And together, we're inviting you in to be our special guest as we take you through some of their amazing experiences, adventures, and journeys. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Louis Diaz podcast.
Okay, we're recording. Hi, Andrew Dean, or Drew, from Drew Travels. How you doing?
Good, man. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's really great to have you here. Honestly, it's been a little exciting for me to think about having you on the show because I'm such a big fan of your work, of your reels and the photos that you take. And it seems like, you know, you have a very go big or go home kind of approach to the work that you do. And I kind of love it. Am I right in saying that?
No, I definitely do. You know, when I started the Instagram thing a couple of years ago, I was actually really against Instagram for the longest time. I thought it was the dumbest platform ever. I'm like, you just share pictures, and it didn't really make sense to me. And I had some friends that were like, well, you just take so many photos, you have to put them somewhere. And I started posting them, and nothing really took off for a while. It was just being consistent for, you know, like a good 2 years before I really started to see any traction. But yeah, and I think what made me really excited about it was kind of realizing that the world is a really small place, and social media, Instagram, whatever, is a really unique way to meet people that would otherwise seem really unattainable. And so yeah, to your point of going big or going home, I think that was kind of it. It was like, maybe I can be like some of these really big guys out there, guys and gals that are doing it, you know?
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, especially, you know, with the podcast, first starting out with a few people in my close network and then realizing that I was going to quickly run out of people in my network to podcast with, and sort of jumping online and, you know, trying to find amazing people like yourself that would be interested in recording and sharing a story. And then, you realize that the world really is small and we're only a Zoom call away, and it's so nice to be able to connect and feel connected to people that are so far away and create these communities that are so, I guess, tight, but so distant, which I really love about it. But I mean, like, tell me, did you always grow up wanting to be a photographer, a traveler, an inspirer of sorts?
No, I don't think. I actually wanted to be an airline pilot. That was my goal when I was a kid. For the longest time, I wanted to be a pilot. And I think what I figured out as I got older, you know, because everyone jokes like, what you want out of life is going to change as you get older. And when you're younger, when you're like 17, 18, you're like, the hell it ain't. Like, it's never going to change. I know what I want. I know who I am. And then, you know, you get 25, 27, 30, 32, and you're like, wow, yeah, it did change. But I think what changed for me was realizing that the reason I wanted to be a pilot was because I wanted to travel, not because I necessarily wanted to be, you know, stuck in a seat for 14 hours hauling people around. And so I think, yeah, kind of that breakthrough moment was realizing that you can separate what your calling is from a job. And I think a lot of people think that the two things are intrinsically connected, that you have to have a job that satisfies your calling. And I don't think that was necessarily the case for me. I think I was able to, thankfully, separate that I really want to travel and I want to meet new people. And I think I was able to separate that from having to have a job that defined that.
That's super interesting because before we started recording, before I pressed the record button, and that's usually when people say their most profound bits when I'm not recording, you were talking about the whole not having this incredible, profound breakthrough travel experience, but sort of building a life that's centered around being able to be consistent with your travels and still hold down a steady sort of job. And yeah, I really love that, actually. I love that you say that like that, because when you said it, it just made me feel a little bit more grounded. Like, oh yeah, you don't have to hit home runs in life all the time. You can sort of just, baseball analogy, which I don't use here in Australia very often. You don't have to hit home runs all the time. You can just sort of chip to and get to first base. and just continue to do that. And you keep running to first base here or there, you're going to eventually have a lifetime of home runs, right?
Yeah, I mean, the game is won on singles and doubles. If you only won the game on home runs, you would lose every game.
Yeah. And again, not a big baseball fan because we don't get it much here in Australia. But great analogy for it.
Yeah, I don't. When you originally reached out to me to kind of work together a little bit on this, I went through and I listened to several of your episodes, and you're right. I do think that the general theme was that a lot of people, at least the ones that get the most kind of screen time, seem to be the ones that have these really breakthrough, monumental travel things, and a lot of the folks that I know. I just finished a trip with Emmett Sparling, for example, and he's got like 1 million followers and works with National Geographic and all these huge guys, and I think his breakthrough was deciding that he was going to not go to film school and instead use the money to go to South America. And, it's like you have these huge monumental swings where it kind of just defines who you are as a person. I have she's another big one that, kind of same thing happened to her. And, people that talk about, I just decided to go to Mexico with, $200 in my pocket and see what happens. And that was never my story. I just kind of did it slow and gradual. And I feel like I'm doing it my way.
Yeah. And I mean, everyone's got a different way of doing things, right? But, we're here now and the quality of your work speaks for itself. However you've managed to sort of string it together has been definitely your own journey, but I'm blown away by the stuff that you produce, but also how much fun you seem to have when you're doing it, how much you share with people as well. I loved there was a piece that you shared a little while ago about sort of going up with a drone. There was a particular location. I'm not sure if it was a Dolomites or something. And then you found that it wasn't actually as good a location as what you thought. And then there was like a little puddle or a lake or something that where you found this reflection. And, just sharing that with people, I think gives them a lot of insight into who you are as a person and how much fun you like to have with what you do and how it sort of blows you away when you're doing it and not just them when they're watching it.
Yeah. It's crazy. I think that people looking from the outside in will see, a reel or a video like that and they'll think, holy crap, like how did this guy think of that? And I I can't give any credit to myself at all. The only reason that we found that puddle was because my partner at the time who was traveling with me, his name's Nicholas. He's a Danish photographer, Nicholas Glued on Instagram. He's been one of my landscape kind of idols ever since I got on Instagram. And he messaged me and said, hey, we got to do a trip to the Dolomites together. I accepted. And I guess all that to say, if it wasn't for him saying, hey, let's go look for puddles. And when he said that, I'm thinking to myself, dude, there's like 30 photographers on this hill back there. Shouldn't we be going to them? And he's like, no, he's like, go put your drone over there and see what you think. And I flew it over and it was a terrible shot. And he's like running around looking for puddles. And I'm like, this guy's crazy. And then he found one and he's like, look. And he's like, I get low and there's the shot. And I was like, oh my God, wow. And it's like, so I can't take any credit. I think every time I travel with other people, other photographers, you just kind of absorb little bits and pieces and styles and you learn new things. And it's definitely a collaborative thing. It's not any one person, I think.
Yeah. And it's a fun process of discovery.
Oh, yeah.
That you probably otherwise wouldn't have if you didn't have the cameras and the objective to shoot these incredible shots. I think often, and I think it was since talking to Nick, who was my last guest, that I've kind of come across this really wonderful idea that when you go somewhere with a purpose to discover something and look for it and seek it, and you don't know what it's going to be at the time,
right.
But it's a shot or a feeling or something that you open your eyes to where you are a lot differently to when you're just kind of traveling for the sake of it, if that makes sense, or going somewhere just to go hiking. You kind of have this appreciation for a puddle that a hiker wouldn't have because they'd be like, oh, there's a puddle that I've got to walk around. What a pain.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a different approach to traveling when you're going for the purpose of capturing shots. Yeah, it's a whole different vibe.
Yeah. So I guess I'd really love to know that point where you I mean, you mentioned that you've hated Instagram for a long time, which I can relate to. And I know guys who grew up shooting Super 8 film and taking medium format photos on these old cameras from the 60s, and they swore they'd never use it. So I can totally understand that vibe. But then there was obviously a bit before you started uploading your work where you were taking photos. And I mean, what was that point in your life? I mean, did you find an old photo album somewhere or an old camera that someone gave you and you just started using it?
No, I mean, yeah, this is, it's funny. I pick up the vibe of kind of how you launch into some of these questions. And I feel like there is someone at some point that you've spoken with where their mother gave them a camera and was like,
no, that was me.
Was it?
No, that's me. Oh man, I don't want to tell you the story about how I got my first camera. Okay, sure. Well,
give me the clip.
Look, the quick version is that I was out with some friends one night. We found this really strange guy. I had just seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and this really weird guy decided to asked us basically to come back to his house, which was really in the middle of nowhere. And when we got there, he broke out a garbage bag full of weed and was like, do you guys want some? And two of my friends were... I was 19.
Oh yeah, all right.
And two of my friends were big smokers, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we want some of that." And he's like, "Oh, I'll go and get another garbage bag for you guys." And so he was gone for about 10 minutes, and my friends had already smoked, and they were starting to get paranoid. And of course, we're in this house in the middle of nowhere, and I had just seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so I'm starting to get triggered by their paranoia. And they're like, "Should we just run for it?" And we were like, "Yeah, let's just get out of here. Let's just run for it." And on the way out, I saw this incredible old Minolta 35mm SLR camera on top of his fridge, and I was like, "Shit, I'd really like to use that." So I just grabbed it and ran off with it.
I love it.
And that was how...
You smoked his weed, grabbed this old camera relic off his fridge and booked it.
Yeah. That's how I got my first camera, and that's how I fell in love with photography. And I shot a lot of really great photos with that camera. I actually just sold it recently for like $50.
That's so crazy.
And if I ever see that guy again, Tony Yayo, I'll give him that 50 and I'll apologize for taking his camera. But that's my story. Yeah, maybe it's monumental. I'm not sure, but I feel like everyone has a story where they come across their first camera and going, "Yeah, I love this."
Right. I think for me, I started out my passion for photography actually started out with wildlife photography. I was always into being outside and hiking, and I like the idea of wildlife photography because it's uniquely challenging. It's like hunting, but you don't actually kill the animal, but you got to be close enough that you could, like, for all intents and purposes, if you had a gun, if you can take a photo of an animal at that kind of range with clarity, it would be the same as if you were hunting it. And so it's kind of all of the instinctual, like, prey drive to go and like track an animal down and find it and like learn its habitat and learn its habits. And then instead of doing harm to it, you're capturing a photo of it and you're leaving it alone and you're leaving. And that was kind of, that was the beginning of it for me.
That's so cool. Yeah, I love that. Hunting in a totally different way. Right, it's still a shot. You still shoot, but you're shooting something completely different.
Right. Yeah. So that's how it started.
And so where were you doing that? Was that locally because where are you based?
I'm in Colorado. Yeah. So there's a lot of wildlife here. We've got the Rocky Mountains, a whole bunch of national parks here in the US. But yeah, I mean, that's how it started. And I think, honestly, I was actually pretty much against landscape photography for the longest time. It's just funny how everything evolves and changes, because I thought landscape was so boring. I'm like, these guys are looking around these tripods and, and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm over here chasing coyotes and wolves. I'm so cool. It's like, so, yeah. But then you eventually start to appreciate that, like, there is really incredible landscape stuff out there as well. You just have to look for it. And then it all kind of became a challenge. Like, what's the coolest wildlife I can get? What's the coolest landscape I can get? What's the most incredible, portraitures I can shoot? And then it just kept opening and opening and opening.
Yeah, I still remember when I was at art school and we did a photography unit, and our photography teacher was taking us through all the different styles of photography. But one of the most memorable was when he talked about the F64 Club, which was guys that were shooting at that F-stop, I guess.
What?
The F64 Club.
I've never heard of it. I have to look this up now.
Yeah, it was a bunch of guys that were shooting landscapes, and the one picture that is etched in my memory forever is this picture of basically the Arizona desert, right? And you can just see everything so clearly, and it's so vast, and it's in black and white.
Right.
But, I think there's something to be said for being able to shoot a beautiful landscape, because it's definitely stuck out with me.
You're right. It's like initially I thought landscapes would be just this like kind of boring kind of, maybe for like old guys or whatever. And then I took my first landscape photo and I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. And then, then I started to realize, okay, there really is something to, there is something to this.
There's an art to it, right? So what was your first landscape picture of? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was just here in the mountain. It wasn't that long ago. I didn't start shooting landscape until about 2020, early 2021. So all of this evolution has happened in the last like 2 years. No, man, I was wildlife up until the beginning of 2021. And at that point, I think I got my first kind of landscape lens and I was like, let's just take this for a spin and see what happens. I was getting ready to go on a trip. I was going to go on a Euro trip it was basically 5 countries dipping down into Morocco. And I was like, how stupid would it be just to bring a cell phone on this trip? And so I was like, let me go learn how to shoot landscape. And I went to the Rocky Mountains and I shot my first landscape photo after shooting wildlife for 4 or 5 years. And I looked at it and I was like, this is the most horrific photo I've ever seen in my life. And then it became a challenge. It was like, okay, so now I've got to get good at this whole new thing. Yeah, it was interesting. 5 countries of traveling will definitely improve your photography.
Yeah, I was going through your website and I came across a few of the different places that you went to, because you've got it all really nicely laid out. But I was really keen to learn and see more about Morocco because I'm fascinated and I want to go there.
That was such a wild trip. Morocco was a blast. It was my first time being in Africa. I guess you can technically call it Africa. And the goal was to go to the Sahara. And so, I wanted to shoot astrophotography. And this is one of those stupid stories where like it's supposed to crescendo into like this grand thing. And then everyone in the room is like, wow, what an amazing traveler. And so the crescendo is, I planned out this massive trip and like drove over the Atlas Mountains and down to the other side and like got on camels and like trekked into the Sahara Desert and like stayed at their camp. And then it was 3 days of overcast and only 2 hours of overcast were going to break at like 1 a.m. when theoretically I would be able to get the astro shot that I wanted. And so at 1 a.m, the alarm goes off and it's like 20 degrees outside. Well, 20 Fahrenheit. So like whatever that is, negative something Celsius, cold. Yeah. And I bundle up and I do my head wrap and all that stuff. And I like hike out into the Sahara Desert and I like set up my tripod and I shoot and there's nothing there. and so I'm Googling because there's just enough. I'm at the top of this like dune. And there's just enough cell phone service for some reason at this dune that I'm able to get 1 bar. And I Google why I'm not. And it turns out the Milky Way is all the way on the other side of the planet. It's only out for like half of the year, obviously. And so I was there in like late November and that sucker was all the way down by Australia at this point. So, but it's just like one of those stupid stories where it's like, wow, like I didn't think to like look up where it would be. And, now obviously I know that there's apps for that. And like some of the stuff that we did in the Dolomites, we planned it really well down to like exactly where it would be above a certain peak. But the first time I tried to shoot astro, I didn't realize that the Milky Way was on the other side of the globe.
And again, like with this kind of work that you do, you're needing to be connected to the planet, to the elements in a whole way that other people just don't think about. Like, someone just going to the Sahara. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's wild, man.
So that was your first experience kind of realizing that, hey, the stars just don't come out all the time.
I don't know why at that point, 31 years on this planet. And I never knew.
Well, who teaches us that stuff? Yeah. Who teaches? Yeah. You don't learn that anywhere. I think that's the beautiful thing about taking up an art form like photography or any art form is that when you get deep into something, it teaches you stuff about the universe, the planet, your community, yourself, that you never would have worked out if you never, went down that route. So, I think that's really fascinating. And I didn't know that. You've taught me something because I just thought...
I learned the hard way.
I just thought, oh, we've got these amazing stars that come out in the summer. And of course, I'm only seeing them in the summer because in the winter here, I'm not out. Like I'm not out looking up at the stars. So that's super interesting.
It's a wild ride, man.
Cool. So, I mean, I'm curious to know a little bit more about you've discovered that you're feeling challenged by landscape photography. It was only 2 years ago ish, we'll call it.
Right.
'Cause we're getting late in 2022 now, and you told me that your first shot was really bad, which surprises me. Considering how the quality of your work looks, maybe bad by your standards, but awesome by everyone else's. Let's just pretend it's at that level.
Possibly.
And then you decided to persist with the challenge, right? Because you were a wildlife guy, like you said, but then you switched to landscape. It was awful at first. You've decided to stick it out. Why did you decide to stick it out and go, well, this is really what I want to do. This is what I want to try and get better at.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is it just challenge? Is it just the challenge?
Because it is, but if it was just the challenge of it, I don't think I'm that much of a perfectionist that I would, be like, oh, there's a challenge, I have to beat it at all costs, even if it's boring as hell. Luckily, I think I'm not that kind of a person. But what I found through like social media, for example, is like, for example, my buddy Nicholas from Denmark, and folks like Emmett Sparling and some of these other incredible photographers that they do everything. They're not just wildlife. They're not just landscape. And so I started to reach out to these folks to network with them. And, so for example, Nicholas and I were chatting for like well over a year before we met in person to go shoot in the Dolomites. And I remember when I first created my Instagram account, he was one of the recommended photographers that popped up. And back then his account was called Dane on a Plane. And I just looked at his stuff and I was like, good God, this guy is good. He is really, really good. And then all of a sudden we're chatting and I'm like, man, this is a real life dude that like I'm chatting with this guy. And then next thing you know, we're like planning to go to the Dolomites together. And I think that was where I started to notice growth, was collaborating with other people and like making peers among other photographers that I like. And I think that's where, I play the Instagram game a little bit, but it's predominantly around for me to meet people like yourself, to meet people like Nicholas and like Emmett, where, the world gets a little bit smaller and maybe you get a little bit bigger. And I think that was kind of the takeaway for me, is like, you can do all of those things. You just have to rub shoulders with the right people and learn the right things.
The world gets a little bit smaller and you get a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Gold.
Yeah.
Love that. Kids, it's so true. I think when you feel like you're experiencing growth, you feel both of those things at the one time.
Oh, yeah.
So it must be so satisfying.
If you're just doing it just to do it, obviously there's going to be some satisfaction. But for me, like, there's a little bit of so for example, I was watching, it was a show on Hulu a couple of months ago, and it was about like tourism and how tourism can either hurt or help a local economy. And like, I forgot the name. I think it's called The Last Tourist. Highly recommended it if you guys can want to watch it on YouTube or whatever. But the gist of the story is like, on one side, you've got these bad for the local economy, bad for people, forms of tourism that just exploit. And then on the other side, you've got tourism that is able to like lift up communities and like help provide, education and resources for communities that otherwise wouldn't have it. And this is the roundabout way of saying, for me, I watched this show and there was this group of women taxi drivers in India that their whole thing is like helping women that have been battered and kind of like put in these really difficult positions. And, they don't have a really great education, and they teach them how to drive and provide them with taxi cabs. And these women are now, feeding their families and educating their kids and pulling themselves out of these things. And I remember thinking to myself, I want to go follow these folks. If they're on Instagram, I want to go follow them. And so I found their Instagram, and like the kind of just the media that they've got going on is like not horrible in the like terrible taste, but just like they don't have exposure to photographers that could have taken the kind of stuff that I feel like they deserve. And so I just DM'd them and I said, hey, I'm thinking about going to India in February. That's kind of my next big trip. I would love to just meet with you guys for a couple hours and just shoot some free shots for you guys and just get you guys some like really cool photos of your cars and of the ladies. And they were like, wow, that's amazing. We would love to. Let us know when. We'll send a driver and we'll bring you to the headquarters and stuff. And I'm just, after that interaction, I like sat back on my couch and I'm like, I just watched a show on Hulu. And like 30 minutes later, I'm chatting with the people that were on that show and offering to do them. Like, it's like, that just blows me away that even exists. Like you couldn't do this 10 years ago. You couldn't just reach out to people that were on TV shows and offer to work together.
Yeah. What a trip that would have been, just to find yourself in that moment where it's like reaching into your TV screen and
It really is.
shaking
Yeah.
someone's hand and having a conversation with them almost.
Yeah. Yeah. So look out for that, I guess, guys, because middle of March, early March, I'm gonna go meet with these amazing women and go take some glamour shots and see what kind of fun we can get into.
Oh, absolutely. I'll reshare all of that stuff because I mean it's so
Definitely.
fascinating that you're doing that. And you know what a noble thing to do. But also here we are again. This is part of your personal journey, and you've realized, you know, through this platform that you once hated,
Right.
it's given you the opportunity to have these, you know, incredible life experiences, which is just,
Definitely.
and at the same time as that filling your cup, you know, you're also doing something really wonderful for them, and giving them some exposure as well, which I'm sure they're really stoked about.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I think you know, there's nothing to say that you have to have this like altruistic reason for doing everything. But for
Mm.
me personally, like there's that little bit of like humanitarian on the back end. Like I think fast forward 10 years from now, that's what I would love to be doing, is just traveling around to places like this and doing things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess you got to go with what makes your heart sing and what keeps you motivated. And I think a lot of the time it is connecting with other people. I mean, I was telling a story earlier this week about how 6 years ago, this week, I started giving free skateboarding lessons on the local beach.
No kidding.
And I had been working on a children's book for like 6 years before that. And I'd published it, and I'd been hustling with it and selling copies and, you know, trying to get stockists and things like that. And
Sure.
I just kind of burnt out through all that. And then one day I decided to start giving people free skateboarding lessons on the beach. I just went there and held a sign up that said, "Hey, free lesson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's just connect."
What
And
happened?
well, it blew up. That summer changed my life. You know, it was weird at first. The first half an
Sure.
hour was really awkward. The beach was packed. There was people staring at their cell phones all over the beach, which was why I wanted to change the vibe up. Half an hour
Right.
later, there's
Right.
all of those people that were looking at their cell phones were looking at me skating up and down the beach with this sign, and I was thinking, "Oh my God, this is so embarrassing." And then suddenly one guy came up, and yeah, I gave my first lesson, and it was a life-changing experience to be able to see how someone that had been afraid to try something now felt comfortable, and then giving that to them. So I can completely, on a smaller, much smaller level, relate to that whole.
No, I wouldn't, dude. That's the thing, though, right? Like, I think it's giving back a little bit, and it's that's self fulfilling. I don't think there's big or small. You know, I think
True.
the numbers on Instagram are kind of it's all vanity metrics, right? If you
Yeah.
can just change one person's life, that's all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly not about vanity metrics for me, but yeah, I think teaching one person how to skateboard here or there is a bit.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, not. Absolutely, yeah.
So that's really inspiring that you've kind of. And was this the first time sort of ever reaching out through to a community or someone via social media and saying, "I'd really love to shoot this for you," just because?
Yeah, I think so. I think everything prior to that was me trying to get collaborations in exchange for hotel stays and kind of the typical travel photographer vibe. And I think going back to what you said about, you know, when you're trying to, you know, you were trying to publish something for work essentially, and you burned out. And I think that's similar, right? Like it's like, oh, okay, I want to go somewhere and I want to do this, and so I'm messaging 40 and 50 and 60 accommodations at one time and hacking down their email addresses and trying to figure out who to message. It burns you out. Yeah. And then like I messaged one taxi company in India that was on a TV show, and they're like, heck yeah, come take some pictures for free. And it's like, I feel alive again. And I feel like, you know, it doesn't matter that all the other stuff happened before, like just giving back a little bit kind of erases all of that.
Mm. You know, sitting here sort of with the context that you gave me earlier around how quickly this has all sort of been happening for you from, you know, 5 or 6 years of shooting wildlife to then switching to landscape, then having that sort of very fast rise, you know, to feeling not only a lot more confident with your landscape work, but also the connections that you've and the memories that you've made through that work. And now you're having this whole new experience as well that you're just about to embark on in March. It sounds like we're talking right now in the middle of your evolution. All right. There's something's evolving and something's brewing for you. I feel like we're certainly not at the end of the story. We're kind of almost at the beginning of what's next for you.
Yeah, no, 100%. My mom told me something a long time ago, and I'm probably taking it out of context, but it was basically that the body moves in the direction the head is facing. And I think the takeaway on a psychological level is what you focus on and what you put your energy towards. Even if you don't feel like you're moving in that direction at that particular moment, eventually you will move in that direction because that's what you're focusing on. That's what you're putting your energy into. Some people call it manifesting. But I think, for me, 2 years ago, something clicked and it was like, let's focus on this, even though it's not my day job. And even though I still have to go to the grindstone 9 to 5 and people don't see that on Instagram, but I'm still, my spare time and my spare energy is learning how to edit and getting these collaborations that expand my network and introduce me to cool people like you and to Nicholas and to Emmett and those kind of folks. And I feel like as long as I continue to put my energy in that direction, eventually that will push me, push my whole body, push everything else in that way.
Yeah, I feel like you're just put into words what I've been feeling for the past 2 months since
Sure.
I decided to come back to the podcast after 2.5 years of dropping it through the pandemic. What you just described was just that's what it's like in words.
Yeah, you just got to keep pushing, man. You got to keep pushing, and it'll seem like nothing's happening, and it's probably because nothing is happening, at least on the front end. But on the back end, everything is slowly, shifting in that direction. You just can't feel it because you see it every day.
Well, it's funny because sometimes if I've gone a little while without recording with someone, I start to feel like, oh, maybe nothing's happening. And then literally as soon as we start having these conversations, I'm like, yes. I'm like sitting here going, pumping my fist and going, yeah, this is why I do this, because I love this. I love this stuff.
Yeah.
And, back again to your point earlier about, not having to have these monumental kind of breakout journeys that define who you are as a person and set you up for the rest of your life. I think it's so wonderful to meet and speak to someone like yourself that is way more low-key about their journey and how they got to where they are, but still finds like these, I think, quite profound moments to be able to share and talk about along the way. That's the gold. It's those little things in life.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's so great talking to you for sure.
I think to your point, you don't realize that the culmination of those little things is what makes the journey. I think everyone's waiting for that like firework finale at the end. And then they kind of realize that the fireworks have been going off this whole time. We just haven't been paying attention, Yeah, if you told me that I would have been that I would be smoking hookah with Emmett Sparling in Istanbul 2 years ago, and I looked at Emmett's account, he's got 1 million followers and he's shooting for Lexus and, and for Apple and all these brands. And it's just like, this guy looks like he's living the dream. And if you told me that, I'd be smoking hookah with him and having a beer and like talking about photography in Istanbul not even 2 years later, I think you're absolutely crazy. And it's like, but to get to that, it was just a culmination of going out and taking shitty pictures of the mountains and figuring out that there's no astrophotography to be found in November in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah.
It just builds up to it.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me about how you laughed at my little setup photo before that I just posted on Instagram.
Man.
Because
that's how it always is. It looks so pretty on the front end, and then you open up the bag and like there's crap falling out.
Yeah.
It's always like that. And it doesn't matter who you are either. Like now that I've seen what some of kind of the A-listers look like in person, and I realize, wow, we're all just regular people. There's no like behind the glimmer of social media. It's just a bunch of guys and gals just making this shit up as we go along.
Yeah. No, I love it. It's so good. So Istanbul was amazing to watch from afar. I loved every minute of it, everything you posted. Please keep posting about Istanbul.
Yeah, man.
Because it's just, you've been able to really capture this historic place that's so culturally rich. The colors, they're so vibrant. And
would you believe that's my first time shooting portraits in my entire life?
Right, yes. And I was about to say, and the people that you've captured as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. There's just so much yes there.
I think that was predominantly why I wanted to meet up with Emmett, because he was putting on a workshop that was specifically focused around portraiture. And I couldn't, I thought landscape was boring. Man, portraits were like 50 clicks below landscape when I originally started shooting. I was like taking pictures of other people. That's like the epitome of boring. Like mountains that don't move, that's like first level boring. People, that's even more boring. I was that much of a wildlife snob. And then, just going to Istanbul and learning how to shoot portraits, and then realizing, wow, it's really gratifying when you can like connect with someone without having to speak with them. And then you just get like this total banger shot that looks amazing, and you show them, and they've clearly never had a picture taken of them like that before in their lives. And that's yours. And it's just like, yeah.
So, I mean, the purpose of going to Istanbul was for a portrait workshop. Is that what I'm picking up?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was to go. Emmett Sparling was putting on a kind of very small for people that were kind of in that circle of photographers, and we just kind of rented an Airbnb, and it was just going out to kind of the same thing, the old bazaar and the spice market, and just going and shooting. And then we'd go back at the end of the day, and we'd do like editing sessions, because I mean, Emmett's stuff is out of control. Like his editing style, I was kind of joking when I went into the workshop. I was thinking, if I can just figure out what his secret sauce is, that would be amazing. If I could just figure out what that secret sauce is. And then watching him edit a picture, and it's like watching like someone cook, a 5-course meal. There's like 200 ingredients, and every little piece comes together to make this fantastic thing at the end. And there really is no secret sauce. It's just the whole, labor of it finally coming together. And it was like, man, there's so much more to this than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, wow. So you're getting first-hand experience with, you'd call him one of your heroes of the photography scene. So there you are, meeting him in person. You're getting first-hand sort of tutelage on not only the production side of photography, but also the post-production side of it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
You're also learning how to shoot portraits for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
You're also probably in Istanbul for the first time.
I was, yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, there's a whole lot going on there for you emotionally, I can imagine, and mentally as well. You're probably, your sensory overload.
And the crazy thing is, I didn't have to sell my house and pack all my bags and put everything into one backpack and like set sail to go do it either. Like, I think the takeaway is, you can still live out your dreams and chase your passions, and you don't have to like make this huge grand gesture to do it. Like, you can just be a regular person that goes to Istanbul to go shoot portraits. All it takes is a ticket.
Yeah. I mean, those bang or bust stories are good too. But yeah.
I mean, it definitely is what inspires me. And every day that I have like a crap day at work or something, I definitely have those bang or bust stories in the back of my head thinking, is this the time when I just like, sell the farm?
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, actually. A few years ago, I was reading the Keith Richards biography, Rolling Stones guitarist.
Yeah.
And you think about a band like the Rolling Stones and you think they're bang or bust, right? You hear about some of their stories and you just think they're epic. But they were just really, like what you described, they were just workhorses. They just got in the studio and made music, and they were doing it really well for a really, really long time before they got noticed. Right. And even after they got famous, they were still doing that.
Right.
So, it's not about getting rich or famous, but when you read books like that from creators that you've always admired in your whole life, and you're like, oh yeah, it's showing up every day and doing this every day, no matter how bad it is. And all we see at the end of it is the songs that they released, not the shit ones that they wrote and recorded and
the
actually
big labels are the ones that you see, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
there's almost a daily basis, honestly, people message me, and they're asking, what can I do to, I think everyone is hoping for like a quick fix to like get big on Instagram or get big on whatever, and they think that getting big is gonna change their lives, like that, like having a huge following is gonna suddenly do something for them. And I think it's actually kind of the wrong way of looking at it. I think having a huge following is a side effect of showing up every day and, like you said, just putting in the work and being a workhorse. There's this couple that I befriended on Instagram as well. I think their handle is called like Nomads and Paws, but they basically do like house sitting for dogs and that sort of thing. And they messaged me they had like 700 followers at the time. It was like a year ago. And they were like, hey, any tips for reels? We're trying to grow on the platform. And I was like, guys, whatever you do, just post every single day, whether it's good, bad, rain or shine, post every single day. And just like, you have to do it for a year. I was like, commit to it for a year. Don't stop, post every single day. And I think their account's bigger than mine now. They finally had a blowout. And they had like a string of like super viral reels, and their account soared through the roof. They also hit big on TikTok. They were featured in like the news, like they're all over the internet now. And They're 10 times bigger than I'll ever be. And it's just amazing to like look at it and be like, a year ago, they were like, hey, how do we take, any tips for reels? And it's just like so silly to look back at it, because now I look at them and like they're my idol.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think what I'm learning about you is that throughout your evolution and your journey that you're going through right now, like giving back to others is like super monumental for you. Those are the moments that stand out to you the most. I mean, I know you haven't been to India yet, but just that interaction that you've had just makes you feel like you're giving.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, that to me, that's the altruistic side of it. Like, you have to find what kind of feeds that inner purpose a little bit more. And as long as you're like working towards that, the rest is gravy.
Everything will be fine. Have you been taking your own advice and posting every day?
I have. Yeah, I try to. I'm not going to lie. It's definitely difficult to stay up on it, but I noticed the biggest growth when I do that. For me, it's like, let me think of a good example. So with, for example, like bowling, think like, for example, right. You're going to have your account is only going to grow when you throw a strike, but how many times are you going to hit a strike every time you throw it? Like, so at the end of the day, like, you have to be rolling the ball every single day to get the chance at hitting that strike. Because if you only throw the ball once a week, you're never going to hit it.
Yeah. Okay, I get it. As soon as you said bowling, though, I zoned out and started thinking about those clown shoes that you wear.
Yeah. I guess you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Wayne Gretzky, ice hockey, gotcha.
Yeah. There you go. So yeah, just showing up every day and posting it, good, bad, or otherwise, and eventually, like, something will stick, and you kind of like level up to that next level, that next platform, and you get to stay on that one for a while.
Yeah. So I want to go back to Istanbul.
Sure.
Obviously, you're there with a whole bunch of other photographers that have decided to take Emmett up on this workshop. What was that like to be around some of your other peers, I guess you'd say? Were there people there that you knew already that you hadn't met, or were there others that you completely didn't know?
Yeah, there were some folks that were already kind of part of that organization as it was, that we had met up on other kind of video calls and that sort of thing. So I had some acquaintances that were going to be soon to be friends. And that was awesome. I mean, it's one thing to like be a photographer. And I feel like in the world that you and I play in, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, are you the only person that you really know that podcasts a lot?
No, I know someone else, but yeah, I haven't connected with a lot of other podcasters around here.
Yeah, so for example, let's say your circle is, I don't know, 100 people deep. Out of those 100 people, how many are podcasting?
Wow, you're really blowing my circle out to be much bigger than it is. One.
Yeah, I guess that's my point.
Creatives, not just podcasters, creatives, like, is full of them. Mostly musos, photographers, creators of some sort.
Sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that was for me, being with because I'm like always the photographer in the group. I'm always like that guy that's like shooting something in the group. And so to be in a group of people that are all shooting something, it was just like mind boggling. It was like almost overwhelming, because like I've never had so many pictures taken of myself that were all just like amazing.
They were good pictures.
Yeah, like they got so many good shots of me. I couldn't believe it. And I'm always taking pictures of other people. It's like a totally different experience to have. Pro photographers taking photos of you. But yeah, and to learn a lot too. I mean, I didn't know how to shoot hyperlapse, for city hyperlapse.
What's that? Can you explain that for us people? Regular ones?
Hyperlapse. It's, I think a lot of, I don't know. You probably have it on your phone. I think they call it time lapse on Apple. But it's kind of like where you set up your camera nice and still, and it shoots like a photo every second for several minutes. And then it blends them all together into a video.
Okay, yeah, time lapse.
Yeah, like a time lapse, yeah. But yeah, I had no idea how to do that, and it's just one of those things that, people look at the finished product and they think this guy just knows how to do everything. But I'm like, I just shot time lapse for the first time a month ago, and I just shot landscape for the first time a year and a half ago, and
Yeah.
And learn a lot.
It's also the location too. I mean, what a rich location to be able to shoot.
Istanbul is, obviously, it's an incredible experience with the culture and everyone there. But then, like, sadly, the day after I left, I think I had been home for like 6 hours, and there was a bombing in Istanbul in the very streets that we were walking on. And, and I thought to myself, that kind of stuff is not unique to any one country. That happens everywhere. I mean, America is unfortunately plagued with this problem all the time. But like, you're going to look at Turkey, for example, and people are going to have kind of that phobia of that region. and potentially are going to avoid traveling there because of the stigma that comes with bombings and that sort of thing. Even if that was the first notable issue in 5 years, here in the US, I mean, God, I feel like it's like every other day we have a problem, but people still travel here, and they don't avoid traveling here. And so it was a kind of a surreal experience to wrap up Turkey and have all of this incredible footage. And then something like that happens. And it's almost like a moral obligation to show people that, like, this is what Turkey really is. It's not about this isolated incident. It's about here, this is what it's about.
Yeah, that's really important. Yeah, I can see how when you're so touched by a place and by an experience that you have, that it takes a lot more than an unfortunate event and the news report that relates to that. Because, I mean, you're right. When else is Turkey in the news?
Right. Exactly.
They're only going to show you the bad stuff, right?
Right. Yeah.
They're not going to show you those good stories that we can relate to. So I think you're right. I think it is your moral obligation, because people are watching what you put out on their screens as well as what Fox News or whatever,
Sure.
CNBC or whatever, whoever you have there in the States, whatever they put out. And so, yeah, you have to fight that fire with fire in a way and show the beautiful side of these things and places. And of course, what a thing to have happen, and what an experience to have, because imagine if that bombing happened before you went to Istanbul. How would you have felt?
Yeah, that's that. I've never even thought about it from that perspective. I would have been nervous. I would have been scared. I certainly wouldn't have probably had the time that I had, because I would have had this preconceived. And it just goes to show you, like, you're not immune to it. Even if you go into it with open eyes, like, you still can't shake that feeling. And so it's almost like, what's that old phrase? Like, something to the effect of, all it takes for evil to succeed is for good people to do nothing. And I think even if you are naturally a good person and are going into a place naturally with open eyes, like, if there's no other forces of good to try to persuade you in one way or the other, you're going to be kind of unfortunately jaded to that scenario right out of the gate. So I agree with you. I think I would have been, unfortunately, very jaded had I had that happen before. But I promise you this, though. I mean, if that had happened and then, like, someone like Emmett Sparling had gone and posted, a bunch of photos from Istanbul, like, showing the people and the culture, I would have been like, you know what, that's worth it. To me, that's worth it to go and see.
Yeah, and so I think it just drives home that whole idea of the moral obligation even more, that you have to sort of be putting out that side of content so that people can go back and visit those places, because it hurts the people. Those selfish acts or those political acts, whatever they are,
right,
they hurt the people in the community in more ways than just the bombing, right? It's the lack of interest in going back to Turkey that people will have for 3, 6, 9, 12 months, however long it is.
Oh yeah.
That hurts. But yeah, that's super interesting that you had that experience. Wow. So what are you doing right now? Are you like me, setting up for Christmas, or are you still working right through? What's happening in your world?
Yeah, the holidays are coming up, which is pretty cool. Just laying low a little bit. I've got a trip planned to Hawaii. Gonna try some van life for a couple days on Maui, and drive around in a Sprinter van and cook outside and all that kind of stuff.
Are you doing that alone?
No, I'm taking my girlfriend with me, so the two of us are going to go together. And I should reiterate, she's going to be the one that's cooking all the amazing food, because I can't cook a Hot Pocket.
Okay, sure.
So yeah, we're going to do 3 of the 4 islands, I guess, and kind of explore. And then it's going to be laying low until February. I've got his name is Rohit. I follow him on Instagram if you guys are interested in.
Yeah, we'll share for sure.
Yeah, Rohit. Yeah, he runs an eco-friendly Bengal tiger experience out of India, tracking tigers. And so he reached out to me and asked if we wanted to collaborate on some content and seeing the tigers. So that's in February.
So you're tying that together with the taxi experience?
Yeah. So it's going to be, almost a month. It's going to be 3 weeks in India. And so the first half of it will probably be focused around the safari and the tigers. And then we'll break off and kind of go do some cultural stuff. I'll meet up with the gals from the taxi company. And then the thought is wrap up the trip with, it'll be my 20th country, which Seems like not that many, but it'll be my 20th country, going up into Bhutan. Actually, that'll be 21. India will be 20, and then Bhutan will be 21. So do that for like 4 or 5 days and go see the Himalayas, and then yeah, that's it. That's all I got planned.
Okay, yeah, just, that's it, Nothing major, but it sounds cool. The van life trip in Hawaii. When you go on these adventures, obviously you're going to take a bunch of your photography equipment.
Sure.
Have you got it worked out what you want to shoot and where? I mean, do you know which stars are going to be in the sky this time, or?
This time I do, yeah. Yeah, there's a Photo Pills. That's the name of the app if you want an app that does, tell you where they're at. But no, man, Hawaii is actually the biggest blunder of the year for me. I had a bunch of airline miles, and I thought I'm going to use them to get us tickets to Hawaii, and I didn't think to look at how expensive hotels were going to be. And so, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I got the flights for $20. How expensive can this trip possibly be if the flights were that cheap? And then I looked, and like hotels, because it's New Year's, are all like $700-800 a night everywhere. There's not a single hotel on the entire island of Maui that's under like $500 a night, and we're there for 5 days. So they're talking like $2,000, $2,500 for 1 week, which I just can't possibly. So then at some point the light clicked, and I was like, let's go get a van. And yeah, so that's how the whole van life. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go shoot van life because this is going to be exciting. It was literally because I messed up again.
That's so good. Our mistakes lead to our greatest triumphs. Remember that.
I think it's so cool, man. Just like parking at the volcano and like sleeping next to a volcano. Like, I think the story is going to be way cooler because I messed up than I got some cheesy hotel.
I think this is exactly what I mean when I'm talking about the evolution of you right now. We're in this moment where you're still figuring it out, and I think the van is the best accident that you'll ever have made.
Probably.
Best mistake, not accident. Because exactly, like, who wouldn't want to wake up next to a volcano if you can? I mean, if it's... Obviously, you're going to do everything above board there, right?
Of course, yeah.
But,
well, speaking of the, I think the other one's erupting right now.
Right. Okay.
Well, at least it was 3 days ago, and you can see it from Maui. Like, the sky is red, and you can see it. It looks like something out of Jurassic Park.
So is that like a photographer's dream to be there during those moments? Especially if you, you have drones.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah. I think if it's still erupting, we might have to go and pop over to the Big Island and go fly a drone into it and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Stay tuned for that, because the flights are like $25. So that's the cheapest volcano experience you'll ever have in your life.
Right. Okay. Wow. And what happens if you lose your drone in the ash of a volcano?
Oh man, that would be so sad. For any photographers listening to this podcast that are worried about losing their gear, all I can say is get some insurance for it and then go live your life. Because I think with wildlife, some of our lenses are just enormous, and they're so expensive, and all the gear is so expensive, and you kind of end up babying it, and you don't want to and you don't get those shots because you're not hanging off the side of a train, and you're not in the mud, and you're not in the rain because you're just so terrified of damaging your stuff. And then I got insurance last year for the first time ever, and it's like $30 a month, and it covers everything. And my deductible is like $100 if I break something. So it's like, now I don't care. Now it's like, go fly that drone into the volcano. Because if you get that shot, how do you beat that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's such good advice. That's the most boring thing that we've talked about this
insurance.
last hour.
Have you ever had anyone talk about insurance on your podcast before?
No, we haven't. But it's so worthwhile talking about, because you're not going to be fully in the moment if you don't allow yourself that ability to be. And that's just it. I mean, we can go to all these amazing places, have all of these incredible experiences, have all of these amazing stories to share, or we could go to those places and be trying to protect everything and not really be fully present. And I think that's the point of the insurance story, right? It's about having the ability to be fully present, as boring as it is. Yeah. Think about insurance.
You'd be surprised how much that comes up. So, for example, I've got this passion project that I'm hoping to do one day. Probably not in the next couple of years, but I have this passion project where I want to go to Venezuela because Venezuela's got, well, you're looking at me like you...
Oh, that's where I was born.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was born in Valencia. Yeah.
A small world.
And I was like, I want to go there in a couple of years too.
So you're intimately familiar with the situation.
Yeah, for sure. But my listeners aren't. So continue.
Well, I mean, you can, So I guess in a nutshell, obviously like the situation is not great. And I think the stigma is kind of similar to Turkey. Like it only makes the news when bad shit happens, and you don't ever really hear about, Angel Falls, for example, in Venezuela, which is like the highest waterfall in the world. And it literally looks like a waterfall that's falling off of this incredible, like I've never seen this in my entire life. I think it's the most beautiful waterfall in the world. And nobody gets to see it because everyone's afraid, that something is going to happen to them when they go. And it's like, my family is saying, well, what about all this photography gear and crap? And I'm like, what? Like, just get it insured and you go. And, and I don't know, maybe that's a little too naive of me, but yeah, one day, I mean, that would be the most incredible trip, is to go do a passion piece on Venezuela and kind of make like a docu venture series.
Yeah, I think the way that your journey's unfolding, I say go with what feels right, because it's been working so far.
You can interview them. We can do some interviews, because honestly, that's what I'm thinking, is like half interview, half adventure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm down for it for sure. I'll figure out my life. I'll sell all my stuff. I'll hit a home run.
2 bags and get some insurance.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, actually, it reminds me, because I left Venezuela when I was very young, and I've seen some things in books, and unfortunately haven't been that connected to my family over there. And, with living a life here and with the situation over there, I'd never really been that interested in looking, back or looking towards Venezuela at this point in my life. And I recently went to Spain and hung out with a friend, a good family friend of ours, Fernando, if you're listening. And him and his wife, Kati, were always watching YouTube videos of these adventurers. And they were like, oh, come on, man, like, come watch some of this with us. We'll show you some really cool videos that these guys are shooting on YouTube of Venezuela. And I was like, wowed. The footage that some of these guys are getting of this place in this country, and then I'm sitting there going, shit, I was born there. Like,
yeah, man.
that's my heritage there. It opened my eyes to it, and that's a feeling that I've never had about that country and that place.
Sure.
And it was given to me by these amazing content creators that have got a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So we can't downplay.
You're from Venezuela and you're getting re-inspired from. That's wild, man.
You never know who your stories and your photos and your portraits, your landscapes, you never know who they're going to touch and how. You just don't. And yeah, that's what I really love about the whole creative, world that we've sort of stepped into. We do it for us. We do it because we want to do something cool and fun and adventurous and feel good about certain things, until we get to that point where we realize that, holy shit, I just inspired someone else and I had no idea that was going to happen, or that they were going to feel that way about that bit of work. So yeah, getting emotional right now thinking about Venezuela. But
yeah, man. Well, dude, this is
so when's your trip planned? Because we're going to have to tee it up.
Dude, let me know when, man. I think 2024 would be an amazing window.
2024. This could be my Emmett Sparling moment, meeting you in Venezuela.
No, hardly, man. This is no. You inspire me equally, because in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to do like an Anthony Bourdain type experience, so like culture, adventure, like the crescendo can be Angel Falls, but the meat of it has to be the people. Because if it's just the crescendo of Angel Falls, then you got 45 seconds of cool drone footage and that's the end of the show, But like the meat of it has to be the people. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I always loved about, for example, watching things like Jamie Oliver cruising around Mexico. It was always the visuals were insane, but he's so good at getting in there with the people. And I think that's what I love about those chefs. Even Gordon Ramsay does it. When they go somewhere where they need to learn the traditions, and as a chef, they know that the best way to learn how to make the food the best possible way is to talk to that nonna over there who's been making it her whole life. Okay. She knows. So
100%.
Yeah. So yeah, I think chefs have really inspired me actually in their adventures and their stories.
It's really basic, right? Like, why do people go to cool places? Because there's fun things to eat and there's fun things to do. And as long as you've got those two things, people will come. Yeah. But if people don't know what those two things are, then it all kind of gets lost because of all of the the white noise from the media, or the lack of noise, because nothing good is being said, nothing positive. You show people that there's like this incredible food, and the senses are overloaded with just amazing sights and visuals and tastes and smells. People will go, and if enough people go, maybe things might actually get better.
Yeah. Hey, this has been so good. I got a lot more than I bargained for here.
Thanks.
I was anxious to do this because
so was I. So as my first podcast, I've never been on one before. So thank you for popping that cherry.
It's the first and the best. Just kidding.
Thanks. No, it'll definitely be the first and best. Yeah, we're gonna laugh about this in Venezuela.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I was a little bit nervous because we didn't do much pre-production together. I sent you a document. I like to be really prepared, but I thought, no, let's just wing it and let's see how we go. And I couldn't have come across a more down-to-earth, inspiring person than yourself.
Thank you, man.
Honestly,
thank you.
Just someone that appreciates the little things, appreciates what it is to just show up every day, has an appreciation for, meeting their heroes and not forgetting who they are and what inspires them. That's the stuff. That's the gold. That's why I do this. And so it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show, honestly, Drew. And this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, I think.
I agree, man. No, this is, sometimes when you know when you know.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those moments that doesn't come along all that often, but when it does, you just know.
Yeah. And look, I mean, you shared a few different bits and pieces with us today. I'll be hitting you up for those links because, of course, I'd love to share them with everyone listening to this podcast. Usually to wrap up a podcast, I'd just like to know, is there anything else that you want to say for the people out there? Anything we missed?
Yeah, there's something I picked up from Emmett in Istanbul, and it may not make a ton of sense to people that aren't photographers, but obviously, like, you'll be familiar with this. In photography, you've got all of your different settings, your shutter speed, your aperture, and all that good stuff. And there's he told me a story about how National Geographic, one of the teams that he was on, trains their photographers with something called f8 and go get it, which f8 is like this really strange aperture where you can't really hit landscape with it because it's not really right for aperture, or it's not a right aperture for landscape rather. And it's not really wide enough for portraits because you don't get a ton of bokeh. It's just like this weird in between where it doesn't really solve any problems for you. And I guess National Geographic tells its photographers, set it to f8 and then go out in the middle of nowhere and just figure it out. And you're not allowed to change it. You're stuck at f8. And if you look at a lot of National Geographic photographers' photos, that kind of almost sandy look that you get where everyone's in focus, but everyone's not really in focus. And that's all from that. That's National Geographic telling people basically just turn it on and go get it. Turn it on and just go. And I think, that for me, that's the takeaway, is it doesn't have to be, this big grand thing that gets you off traveling. It doesn't have to be that all the settings are correct or that, the universe is telling you to go. Sometimes you just got to just go. And then you meet people like yourself, and we end up in Venezuela 2 years later.
Yeah, which I'm really looking forward to. F8 and go get it, everyone. Did you catch that? F8 and go get it. Love that. And usually to wrap up an episode, you may have heard, I like to sort of give us a round of applause because, one day there's going to be a crowd here recording these. But thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to have you, Drew. I'm looking forward to seeing what you get out of Hawaii, your first van life photography adventure. On 3, 2, 1, if you want to join me for a round of applause, let's do it. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Woo!
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Drew.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Louis Diaz podcast. To find out more about any of our guests and catch additional photos and content from this episode, find us on Instagram at Louis Diaz Podcast.